Okay, thank you for the question. My answer will be that China has not been excluded from a global economic order, but China has been underrepresented in some of the global economic institutions, especially the global financial institutions. That has not been a problem for the global, for example, the trade institutions, because immediately after China joined the WTO back in 2001, China has become one of the largest, and until today, the largest trading country in the world. And so the voice of China, the influence of China has been reflected accordingly in the multilateral trade negotiations like the Doha round. And in fact, many scholars have argued that because of this rising influence of China and other emerging economies like India and Brazil, that has made this round of the negotiation more difficult to proceed, because in the past round of the negotiations, when the emerging economies didn't have that much leverage in the negotiation, it was relatively easier to move forward the agenda as wished by a small number of the established large Western countries. For the global financial institutions, China does have this feeling that it has been underrepresented, at least until recently. As we know, the 2010 IMF reform package, it was not ratified by the US Congress until last December 2015. So it has not been able to be implemented yet. With the implementation of this new IMF reform package, then China's voting share will be able to be to increase from the current near 4% to 6.3%. That will make China the third largest member in the IMF, and that, of course, will help China increase its voting power, voting share, and also its influence overall in the global financial architecture. That, I think, is something China has been waiting for a long time. Well, I think one of the main sources of dissatisfaction from China is the fact that China was not part of the rule makers when those institutions were created at the first place. They were those neoliberal global institutions, as we all know, are the product of the Bretton Woods system. At that time, China didn't really have any influence in the formation and the creation of the institutions. So many Chinese policymakers and policy scholars feel that China has to accept the rules that has been made by others. And today, when China is trying to modify or change some of the rules, they feel it's extremely difficult because China really doesn't share the fundamental values behind those rules completely or fully. For example, as something we always talk about is that the free market principle should go with democracy, human rights, and those political values. But China share part of it, but not all of it. So that has made China very difficult, not only to change the rules, but also to come up with alternative rules. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that there must be a reason for China, to take this initiative of AIIB and also the BRICS Development Bank. What these two initiatives have in common is that they want to do something that the current existing global financial institutions are not doing or are not doing very well. For example, to focus on infrastructure, to focus on the development need of the developing countries, and to emphasize the important role played by the emerging economies, including the 5 BRICS countries and, of course, China in the case of the AIIB. And but I don't think the creation of all this parallel institution will actually negatively shape the current global economic order in the sense that one, they are too new. It's too early for us to tell, the future development. And two is that if you look at the current practice of the AIIB and the BRICS Bank, they have not made the rules to challenge or to replace the current existing global rules. For example, the AIIB has agreed among the 57 founding nations that China will not have the veto power, and the practice, especially the surveillance practice, will follow the procedure of the IMF. So it has been defined as trying to make it as complementary as possible to the current existing global economic institutions instead of like challenging it. But of course, those are the platform created by China so that China will be able to play a bigger role within the platform. I think China has done a lot by creating all these kind of parallel organizations by trying to focus on its regional power and influence. If we think about the AIIB, this is really a direct challenge or the competition with the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, that has been dominated by Japan. And so instead of challenging the global economic order, I think China really wanted to increase its power and influence in the region of Asia Pacific first. And the other example is the RCEP negotiation, the regional economic partnership negotiation that has been considered by many as a counterpart or the alternative to the TPP negotiation, the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiation. One thing I think I want to add is that under the new leadership, it's very interesting to see that Xi Jinping seems to be a lot more ambitious and is willing to act on his ambition to make China more than an emerging economy, but a great nation. That has been a very clear foreign policy shift of China. And of course, that kind of a domestic thinking will affect China's behavior on the international arena as well.